A bear and a rabbit were walking through the woods when they came across a magic lamp. Rather than argue over who would use it, they rubbed it together, and out came a magic genie who offered them both 3 wishes. After a moment, deciding amongst themselves, they both agreed to let the bear go first. The bear approached the genie. "For my first wish, I wish that all the bears in the forest, except for me, were female." "As you wish," said the genie. And just like that, all the other bears in the forest were female. The genie then turns to the rabbit for his wish. "Rabbit, what would you like for your first wish?" "I want a helmet." "A helmet?" asks the genie. "Okay." And like that, the rabbit has his helmet. The genie turns back to the bear. "And for your second wish, bear?" "For my second wish, I wish that all the bears in North America, except for me, were female." "As you wish," says the genie. And just like that, all the other bears in North America were female. The genie then turns to the rabbit for his second wish. "I want a motorcycle," says the rabbit. "Ah, that makes sense," says the genie, putting 2 and 2 together. "A helmet and a motorcycle, of course." And just like that, the rabbit gets his motorcycle. The genie turns back to the bear for his third and final wish. "Bear, what is your last wish?" "I wish that all the bears in the whole world, except for me, were female." "As you wish." And just like that, all the other bears in the world were female. The genie then turns to the rabbit, who is on his motorcycle and revving the engine. "And what do you want for your last wish, rabbit?" The rabbit slowly looks up, staring off into the distance. "I wish the bear was gay." And with that, the rabbit rides off into the sunset. A wife leaned into her husband and purred, "Have you ever seen $20 all crumpled up?" The husband shook his head. "Nope." She slowly unbuttoned her blouse, reached into her lace push-up bra, and pulled out a crumpled $20 bill. He grinned. "Nice trick." Then she teased, "Ever seen $50 all crumpled up?" He gulped. "No." Off comes the skirt. Out comes a crumpled $50 from her lace panties. Now he's sweating in anticipation of what's coming next. Then she leans in and whispers, "Ever seen $50,000 all crumpled up?" He practically shouts, "No, but I'd love to." She pauses, gives him an apologetic look, and says, "Go look at our Mercedes in the garage." An Aussie truckie walks into an Outback cafe with a full-grown emu behind him. The waitress asks them for their orders. The truckie says, "A hamburger, chips, and a Coke," and turns to the emu. "What's yours?" "Sounds great. I'll have the same," says the emu. A short time later, the waitress returns with the order, "That will be $9.40, please." And he reaches into his pocket and pulls out the exact change and pays. The next day, the man and the emu come again, and he says, "A hamburger, chips, and a Coke." The emu says, "Sounds great. I'll have the same." Again, the truckie reaches into his pocket and pays with exact change. This becomes routine until the two enter again. "The usual?" asks the waitress. "No, it's Friday night, so I'll have a steak, baked potato, and a salad," says the man. "Same for me," says the emu. Shortly, the waitress brings the order and says, "That will be $32.62. Once again, the man pulls the exact change out of his pocket and places it on the table. The waitress cannot hold back her curiosity any longer. "Excuse me, mate, how do you manage to always pull the exact change from your pocket every time?" "Well, love," says the truckie, "a few years ago I was cleaning out the back shed and found an old lamp. When I cleaned it, a genie appeared and offered me 2 wishes. My first wish was that if I ever had to pay for anything, I would just put my hand in my pocket and the right amount of money would always be there." "That's brilliant," says the waitress. "Most people would ask for $1 million or something, but you'll always be as rich as you want for as long as you live." "That's right. Whether it's a gallon of milk or a Rolls Royce, the exact money is always there, says the man. Still curious, the waitress asks, "What's with the bloody emu?" The truckie pauses, sighs, and answers, "My second wish was for a tall bird with a big backside and long legs who agrees with everything I say." A cowboy in Oklahoma got pulled over by a state trooper for speeding. The trooper started giving him a long lecture about slowing down, really throwing his weight around to make the cowboy squirm. As the trooper wrote the ticket, he kept swatting at flies buzzing around his head. The cowboy said, "Having trouble with circle flies, huh?" The trooper frowned. "Circle flies? Never heard of 'em." The cowboy grinned. "They're really common on ranches. We call 'em circle flies because they're almost always found circling around a horse's ass." The trooper paused. "Wait a minute. Are you calling me a horse's ass?" The cowboy replied, "Oh no, sir. I'd never disrespect law enforcement like that." The trooper nodded. "Glad to hear it," and went back to writing. After a moment, the cowboy added, "Still, kinda hard to fool them flies, though." A bus full of nuns falls off a cliff, and they all die. They arrive at the gates of heaven and meet St. Peter. St. Peter says to them, "Sisters, welcome to heaven. In a moment I will let you all through the pearly gates, but before I may do that, I must ask each of you a single question. Please form a single file line." And they do so. St. Peter turns to the first nun in the line and asks her, "Sister, have you ever touched a penis?" The sister responds, "Well, there was this one time that I kinda sorta touched one with the tip of my pinky finger." St. Peter says, "All right, sister, now dip the tip of your pinky finger in the holy water, and you may be admitted." And she did so. St. Peter now turns to the second nun and says, "Sister, have you ever touched a penis?" "Well, there was this one time that I held one for a moment." "All right, sister. Now just wash your hands in the holy water, and you may be admitted." And she does so. Now at this, there is a noise, a jostling in the line. It seems that one nun is trying to cut in front of another. St. Peter sees this and asks the nun, "Sister Susan, what is this?" There is no rush. Sister Susan responds, "Well, if I'm going to have to gargle this stuff, I'd rather do it before Sister Mary sticks her ass in." A man's entire family was killed by a masked dolphin. He set off on a quest for vengeance. He searched high and low for the identity of the masked dolphin. He traveled the world asking dolphin gurus and dolphin historians. He searched for 10 years before he found his first clue. In a shallow pool at the top of a tall mountain, he found a dolphin deep in meditation. "Wisest of dolphins, I seek your dolphin wisdom. Where is the masked dolphin that murdered my family?" "What you seek is in the asking well. Go to the asking well, ask your question, and you will find your answer. You only get one question, so make sure it's good." The mysterious dolphin responded mysteriously. He left on a new quest, looking for the asking well. He found many wells that were, well, wrong. There was a well of knowledge that was wrong. There was a well of power that was wrong. The fountain of youth wasn't even a well, so he was pissed off when he found that too. Finally, another decade later, he found the well of asking. Inside the well of asking, he found not a dolphin, but a porpoise. He was quite a dolphin expert at this point, so he instantly recognized that it wasn't a dolphin. "Porpoise of the well, where is the dolphin that killed my family? If and only if you defeat me in armed combat will I reveal the answer to the question you ask." So they dueled with swords. The porpoise's footwork was exceptional, but the man had been wandering the world for 2 decades, and there wasn't much to do when you're walking for 2 decades but practice your vengeancing. He skewered the porpoise after a long and bloody fight, and it fell back into the well. He asked it again. "Where is the dolphin that killed my family?" The porpoise, with its dying breath, responded, "You're asking the wrong question. It wasn't a dolphin that killed your family. Maybe if you had phrased your question better, you would have gotten a better answer, you idiot." The porpoise expired without answering the second question the man thought up much later. It would have been a much better question to ask. He never found his vengeance, but did later remarry, gaining several stepchildren that called him by his first name. The real murderer between you and me was the porpoise from the well. The man asked the wrong question, but by winning the fight, he defeated the porpoise of asking anyway. A tribe of Native Americans generally referred to their woman by the animal hide with which they made their blanket. Thus, one woman might be known as squaw of buffalo hide, while another might be known as squaw of deer hide. This tribe had a particularly large and strong woman, with a very unique, for North America anyway, animal hide for her blanket. This woman was known as squaw of hippopotamus hide, and she was as large and powerful as the animal from which her blanket was made. Year after year, this woman entered the tribal wrestling tournament and easily defeated all challengers, male or female. As the men of the tribe admired her strength and power, this made many of the other women of the tribe extremely jealous. One year, 2 of the squaws petitioned the chief to allow them to enter their sons together as a wrestling tandem in order to wrestle squaw of the hippopotamus hide as a team. In this way, they hoped to see that she would no longer be champion wrestler of the tribe. As the luck of the draw would have it, the 2 sons who were wrestling as a tandem met the squaw in the final and championship round of the wrestling contest. As the match began, it became clear that the squaw had finally met an opponent that was her equal. The 2 sons wrestled and struggled vigorously and were clearly on an equal footing with the powerful squaw. Their match lasted for hours without a clear victor. Finally, the chief intervened and declared that, in the interests of the health and safety of the wrestlers, the match was to be terminated and that he would declare a winner. The chief retired to his tepee and contemplated the great struggle he had witnessed, and found it extremely difficult to decide a winner. While the 2 young men had clearly outmatched the squaw, he found it difficult to force the squaw to relinquish her tribal championship. After all, it had taken 2 young men to finally provide her with a decent match. Finally, after much deliberation, the chief came out from his teepee and announced that the contest was a tie, adding, "Clearly, the squaw of the hide of the hippopotamus is equal to the sons of the squaws of the other 2 hides." A man gets home early and finds his friend in bed with his wife and in a rage shoots him. He looks at his wife and asks her if she has anything to say. "Wife, you keep doing things like that and you won't have any friends left." One blonde and one brunette inherit the family ranch. Unfortunately, after just a few years, they are in financial trouble. In order to keep the bank from repossessing the ranch, they need to purchase a bull from the stockyard in a far town so that they can breed their own stock. They only have $600 left. Upon leaving, the brunette tells her sister, "When I get there, if I decide to buy the bull, I'll contact you to drive out after me and haul it home." The brunette arrives at the stockyard, inspects the bull, and decides she wants to buy it. The man tells her that he will sell it for $599, no less. After paying him, she drives to the nearest town to send her sister a telegram to tell her the news. She walks into the telegraph office and says, "I want to send a telegram to my sister telling her that I've bought a bull for our ranch. I need her to hitch the trailer to our pickup truck and drive out here so we can haul it home." The telegraph operator explains that he'll be glad to help her, then adds, "It's just 99 cents a word." Well, after paying for the bull, the brunette only has $1 left. She realizes that she'll only be able to send her sister 1 word. After a few minutes of thinking, she nods and says, "I want you to send her 1 word. Comfortable." The operator shakes his head. How is she ever going to know that you want her to hitch the trailer to your pickup truck and drive out here to haul that bull back to your ranch if you send her just the word comfortable? The brunette explains, "My sister's blonde. The word's big. She'll read it very slowly. Comfortable." Bob came home drunk one night, slid into bed beside his sleeping wife, and fell into a deep slumber. He awoke before the pearly gates, where St. Peter said, "You died in your sleep, Bob." Bob was stunned. "I'm dead? No, I can't be. I've got too much to live for. Send me back." St. Peter said, "I'm sorry, but there's only one way you can go back, and that is as a chicken." Bob was devastated, but begged St. Peter to send him to a farm near his home. The next thing he knew, he was covered with feathers, clucking, and pecking the ground. A rooster strolled past. "So, you're the new hen, huh? How's your first day here?" "Not bad," replied Bob the hen, "but I have this strange feeling inside, like I'm gonna explode." "You're ovulating," explained the rooster. "Don't tell me you've never laid an egg before." "Never," said Bob. "Well, just relax and let it happen," says the rooster. "It's no big deal." Bob did, and a few uncomfortable seconds later, out popped an egg. Bob was overcome with emotion as he experienced motherhood. He soon laid another egg. His joy was overwhelming. As he was about to lay his third egg, he felt a smack on the back of his head and heard his wife saying to him, "Bob, wake up! You're in the bed." Bill was on the side of the road hitchhiking on a very dark night and in the midst of a fierce rainstorm. The night was rolling on and no car went by. The storm was so strong he could hardly see a few meters ahead of him. Suddenly, through the swirling rain, Bill saw a car slowly coming towards him, and as it drew level with him, it stopped. Desperate for shelter and without really thinking about what he was doing, Bill got into the back seat of the car and closed the door. That was when he realized there was nobody behind the wheel, and the engine wasn't even on. Mysteriously and soundlessly, the car started moving slowly forward. Bill looked at the road and saw a curve approaching. Now he was scared, and he began to fear for his life. But just before he reached the curve, a ghostly hand appeared through the window of the car and turned the steering wheel. Bill, paralyzed with terror, watched how the hand appeared every time they came to a curve. When he saw the lights of a pub down the road, Bill gathered all his bravery and strength, jumped out of the car, and ran to the pub. Wet and out of breath, he rushed inside and asked for 2 shots of scotch. Shaking and half crying, he began telling everybody about the horrible experience he had just been through. A silence enveloped everybody when they realized he was not drunk, but was for real. About 10 minutes later, 2 guys walked into the same pub. They were also wet and were out of breath. Looking around and seeing Bill sobbing at the bar, one said to the other, "Hey, Bruce, that's the idiot who got in the car while we were pushing it." A man walks into the election office, says to the receptionist, "I would like to put my name forward for the forthcoming elections to be an independent candidate." The receptionist replied, "Certainly, sir. Please fill out this form." He was filling out the form until he came to the question, "Are you circumcised?" So he asked the receptionist, "Is that question necessary?" She replied, "If you are circumcised, you are not eligible." He asked what difference it would make if he was circumcised. She replied, "To become a politician, you have to be a complete prick." So it's 1941, and a young German boy is listening to the radio. On the radio, Hitler announces that Germany is declaring war on the United States. The boy asks, "Father, where is the United States?" "Here, let me show you," his father responds and points at a map of North America. The boy then asks, "We are at war with Russia too, right? Where's that?" The father then points at a map of the Soviet Union. "I think we're also at war with the British," the boy says. "Where on the map are they?" The father then points at the British Isles and the numerous British colonies, dominions, and protectorates. "And where are we, father?" the boy questions. The father, starting to become annoyed by his son's constant questioning, finds Central Europe and points out Germany. The young boy processes what he has just been told for a moment. "Father, what now?" The father responds, "I have one more question." "What is it?" "Has Hitler seen this map?" There's a bizarre black market concession stand in North America which sells only human body parts. Customers who wish to purchase an item must use code phrases to avoid the authorities' suspicion. One night, a blind man stops by the stand. "What would you like to purchase today?" asks the cashier. "Oh, nothing," the blind man says. "I was just looking around." A few hours later, a deaf man approaches the stand. The cashier realizes he can't hear him and uses sign language to ask what he'd like to purchase. "Well, I heard you guys are having a sale," the deaf man states with a wink and a nudge. Finally, just before that night's closing time, a muscular man with no apparent disability walks up to the stand. The cashier asks what he'd like to purchase. "I don't know. I heard you guys sold cherries," the man states with a look of subtle expectation. The cashier, despite going through his mental checklist of code phrases, has no idea what he wants. "I'm sorry, we've sold out on that item," the cashier says with a puzzled stare. "Ah, motherfucking Christ!" the man screams in pseudo-frustration. However, the cashier just stands there with an agitated face. The customer, realizing his attempts aren't getting through to the employee, tries a different approach. "Well, that's a darn shame," he continues. "And I traveled across the entire count." The man coughs. "Try to get here."